Hi, and welcome to this podcast, the second recording here on Friday. Alex has a friend that she's wanted me to connect with, and we chat a little bit on Facebook and other social places. She's really wanted to have Todd here on the podcast, and I'd like that, but Todd wanted us to have one of his students, Nate. And I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I don't want to mess it up. So as we roll in here, I'm recording this after our conversation. I'll let Nate pronounce his last name so I do not mess that up. I was excited, even though it's been a busy week, and I just did some prep within the last 90 minutes or so. I was excited to have Nate in because it's something that we overlook, but every now and then I nerd out about it, mostly with... I pay attention to the birds now. I didn't, when I lived downtown, I saw no wildlife. When I moved to where I did, I embraced wildlife, and I always walk the dogs, and I'm close to the park. So lots of things, many birds. And Nate is a birding expert. Got into it really young and is now a savant with some of these things. In addition to me kind of going, oh, look at that, when literally a blue jay will, so I look out my studio door and I see the apartments that you might drive by here in Arlington, and it's just like an urban setting. And I see a beautiful blue jay, and it's like it's a pop of color in this basically unassuming background that I get to look at. So I pay attention to birds, and I do know that this is a very important area here where we live, and it doesn't get as much credit as you would think because we're the Glass City and the Mud Hens and everything else we're known for. But the biggest week in birding happens here in this area. Hasn't been what it usually is for the last 2 years for the obvious reasons, but just like for Jeep Fest, thousands of people will from all over the planet will descend on Toledo to celebrate Jeep. Very much similar happens here in the area. And I think the note Todd gave me was the Solheim Cup brought in $50 million for the area. This biggest week in birding for the entire area will bring in about $40 million. So sit back and enjoy a visit with Nate. And I'm just going to say we get into dinosaurs, but with very good evolutionary reason. Welcome to the studio. You can pull that microphone a little closer to your face.
Sure.
First question. How do you pronounce your last name?
Koszycki.
Koszycki?
Yes.
Okay.
It's Polish, so it's tough.
The odd thing was when I was typing up some notes for myself in my phone, the predictive text spelled it out correctly.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe that bodes well for our visit here today.
I guess so, yeah.
I don't know what Todd Crail told you about. What did he tell you that you were getting into with this?
He told me that I would be talking about bird migration, different aspects of ornithology, and just overall just how important the Toledo area is for wildlife and nature in general.
Yeah.
So,
how old are you?
I will be 22 tomorrow.
Oh, my. Do you, this seems like a unique interest for someone your age. Would that be inaccurate?
I think there's a stereotype to what most birders are, but in general, that stereotype is kind of being abolished considering there's groups like the Ohio Young Birders Club and other students at University of Toledo who really enjoy being environmentalists. So I think the trend is really expanding to younger generations at this point.
I don't know if Todd told you. Todd probably didn't tell you this. I'm actually fascinated. I'm glad to have you in here to talk about all of this stuff. We're big animal lovers on this podcast, but it's mostly the standard things like dogs and whatnot. If there's a weird animal story, we'll talk about that.
Right.
I lived downtown for a long time, and I didn't see anything. I didn't even see pigeons, and usually pigeons are like a downtown bird thing, but not here in Toledo. I moved close to Swan Creek Park, Swan Creek Metro Park. Sorry, my brain's out of it today. And my life changed. Some of my friends said that I'm like a Disney princess because being so close to the park, all these random animals like to come to my back door and torment my dogs. And I get to see a lot of neat things. One of those was unique birds. The standard robins. There is another bird. Maybe if I still have the message from my friend, He is an outdoor person who does a lot of stuff, a lot of videography. He's a wildlife filmmaker, does a lot of stuff at the metro parks. He didn't know what this bird was, but they're always outside. Long story medium, I've come to be quite fascinated by the colorful array of birds that we have here.
Awesome.
Right behind you, I mean, I have the door open not to create the ambiance of birds, but it actually gets warm in here. But I'm on alert because I see a lot of blue jays. I see a lot of cardinals. In fact, of all the animals that come to my back door where I live, the cardinal, I usually leave peanuts out for the squirrels. Mm-hmm. The cardinal is the one that flies to the back door with no fear of the dogs coming over to the window and barking, and kind of cocks its head and goes, "Bro, where's the food at?"
Yeah.
But I know that we have the biggest week in birding here. That's been on my radar for a couple of years. So I am not a total novice, knowing that we have an incredible array of birds to be interested in here. And that's why I'm glad that you're here to talk about that.
We do. I'm glad to be here. If people don't understand that Toledo and Northwest Ohio in general is a very important area for birds, and both breeding birds and bird migration. So it's a pleasure to be here to talk about that.
Why is it so important? Are we we have the biggest week in birding, and it's May 6th to the 15th, right?
Correct.
And we will probably have thousands of people here. I know it's a big influx of money and people for the area. I think the last 2 years it has not happened, right? Because of COVID?
Correct. Last year was virtual.
Okay.
So there were virtual guided tours and there were presentations online, but there wasn't anything in person last year.
Full swing this year. So back to that original question, why is this such a hot spot for that?
There's a couple different reasons why there's a hot spot. And it all begins down south in South America and Central America. And this refers to migrating birds who pass through going to Canada, or some of them do stay in our habitats to breed. So what happens is these birds a few weeks ago, or probably late February, early March, they undergo this hormonal change affected by daylight. And they undergo this phenomenon called migratory restlessness, to where their hormones are changing. They just know they have to go north to breed. And so what will happen is these birds will begin to move north, and some will either go around the Gulf of Mexico, island hop from the Bahamas onto Florida and those other coastal states, continue north, or some will just go straight over the Gulf, which is an 18-hour flight.
And they're flying the whole time?
They're flying the whole time. Not the ones that island hop or go around the Gulf.
Sure.
They will make pit stops, but if you're going over the Gulf, you have nowhere to stop, so you got to keep going.
Explain how they can have the energy to do that.
A lot of it happens internally. Their metabolisms change, and they eventually, if they're getting too tired, they actually use a lot of their fat reserves and even some of their muscle reserves. So once they pass that Gulf, they need to refuel.
Sure.
And once they get over that Gulf, they continue north through eastern United States. And what happens when they reach Northwest Ohio and the Lake Erie area in general is they see that huge body of water. And so they're thinking to themselves, okay, we already crossed a huge body of water. We're going to have to refuel for this. So they will stop at these stopover habitats right along the lakeshore. Places like McGee Marsh Wildlife Area, Iowa National Wildlife Refuge, Maumee Bay State Park. Those are all prime hotspots for birds to refuel on insects before they cross over that lake.
What are some of these birds that begin in South America and come up here? Probably not like what I mentioned, the cardinals and the blue jays, more unique birds that we don't see here because they're on another continent.
Right. The one that draws birders from all around the world is this family known as warblers or wood warblers. These species, there's about 36 different varieties of them. Multicolored, multi-vocalizations. We also have birds like orioles and tanagers that we see here over the summer. Birds like thrushes. There's a whole mix of them.
What do these look like?
These are all songbirds. So
Okay.
they're the typical archetype you'd see in like a cardinal or a robin. So they're colorful. They're as the name implies, they sing. And these warblers, they're only about 5 inches, and they weigh half an ounce. And so these guys are crossing through the whole entirety of the eastern United States, over the Gulf of Mexico, and over Lake Erie, just to go breed in Canada and other places.
I guess like horny teenagers, when you're driven and you got to take care of something, you just go.
Well, there's one way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, it's our biology. Everything on this planet, for hundreds of thousands of years from millions of years. It's to make more of what we are.
Right.
So as much as we think we as humans often treat it as pleasure but procreation, the initial part of the instinct was make more of us.
That's how evolution drives us.
Yeah. So do they have? We'll come back to what's going on here. Is this area seems like just a pit stop? Do those birds keep going north?
A lot of them do. A lot of them are specific to their habitats when it comes to breeding. So a lot of these warblers and vireos and other species, they will continue to the boreal regions of Canada, meaning boreal means north. And so a lot of that habitat is kind of coniferous, so there's a lot of pines and trees like that they thrive on. But the birds that breed here, there's actually a lot of birds that migrate through that do breed here.
Mm-hmm.
We have an array of habitats from the marshes out by Lake Erie. We have a lot of great urban little oases here in the Toledo area. And then out west, the globally important Oak Openings region is phenomenal for a wide variety of birds.
So after they do all this, where do they go? Do they just stay here? Do they keep their bird family going, or do they go back to South America?
A lot of them will go back. So any of the birds that start off in South America, they're going to go right back. So, but we do, like I said, have resident birds that stay year-round. Like we have our cardinals, we have our robins who do migrate, but a lot of them will stay for the winter to eat berries. So not all birds leave.
Right.
So
we have the biggest week in birding back as usual, the 6th of May through the 15th. Does that coincide? Because I had never seen this before, or I overlooked it. The Great Lake Erie Birding Trail, do they coincide with one another?
The Great Lake Erie Birding Trail is a set of different sites throughout our region that all interconnect to form this semi-trail. So they're essentially a collection of birding hotspots throughout our area.
So dive into some of those places that you had mentioned, where people could go look at these. I know you mentioned like Oak Openings, and people are well aware, I think, of that might be many people's favorite metro park for a variety of things.
One of mine too.
What could they be looking for? Where could they hunker down at? Or maybe even just outside of that? Will we see any of these things in neighborhoods or maybe close to the river downtown?
Right. Well, that's where it all starts. For me personally, I started birding in my backyard and at our local metro parks. My first metro park that I would bird at was Sidecut Metro Park, and that one is visited by a ton of people, and there's a lot of great habitat. Like there's the riverine corridor, there's the woodlands, there's some grasslands there, and you can find a variety of birds pretty much wherever you are in the city.
Birding, I'm sure people are familiar with the phrase. It's a verb. What specifically do you mean by birding? Because I think the layman may be like, oh, there's Nate looking at a bird and maybe taking some pictures. Is it more technical and involved than that?
Not necessarily. The term bird watcher is kind of outdated at this point, just because you're doing a lot more than just watching. You are watching, but you're also listening, you're taking notes, you're trying to understand what that bird is, what it's doing, why it's here, and etc. So the term birding has kind of evolved into a term that most birders will use these days.
What do you do when you do things now to go birding? What is your practice like?
That's what's special about birding, is that you can essentially do it in any way as long as you're not harming the birds. Personally, I'm very observational. I will go out and just try to find as much as I can see. It all just depends on how I'm feeling that day too. Sometimes I'll just go out and sit on my porch and look at the cardinals. Other days I'll be trying to find 100+ species in 24 hours. So, but it's very observational. You take notes. I do take photographs. Even though I'm not much of a photographer, I've had my same camera since probably 7th grade. So once I pay off these student loans, I'll be upgrading to another camera. But like I said, birding, you can do it any way you want.
How are humans' dangers to birds? I know there's probably some warnings. People shouldn't be feeding certain types of food to birds. So talk about us. We are the apex predators. How do we interfere with the lives of birds, and how can someone bird or enjoy the biggest week in birding, or just go out to a metro park and not do something that endangers a bird?
Right. Well, there's a lot of issues that humans have caused throughout human history. I mean,
we're the worst thing on the planet.
Well, but we're part of it, so we have to work with it, and we have to do our best to maintain some stability for both us and our wildlife. And So issues like habitat degradation and destruction from overuse of development and other projects. Pollution's another big one. If you're walking through a park, find a trash can.
Right.
If you can.
Yes. How about more like on a one-on-one experience, like pollution? Well, I was thinking large level pollution and tearing down of green space. What about if I'm at side cut? Just observe. I don't want to interfere. Birds aren't really like squirrels per se, where they might interact with you. But people shouldn't be feeding birds certain things either, right?
Right. Yeah. There is one issue when it comes to feeding ducks specifically, because people will feed ducks bread, which in thought is a nice thing to do. But at the end of the day, the science behind it is that bread is actually, there is no nutrition at all in bread for ducks. It's almost like feeding them styrofoam in a way. So they're feeling full, but they're not getting any nutritional value out of that. And they actually can develop a case called angel wing, where their wing feathers begin to wilt because they're not getting the essential nutrients from their native vegetation that they eat underwater.
We see a lot of ducks. When I was living downtown, I saw a lot of ducks. I saw a lot of geese. Some of them were very nasty and terrorized my dogs. You would say that they're like teenagers. They would set up on a corner and then just live there and scare anybody off. What would you feed a duck? What would you feed some of the birds the blue jays, the cardinals? What is something safe to pass along to them other than the obvious, I guess, bird feeding food?
Right. Regarding ducks, to my knowledge, I haven't gone out and fed ducks personally, but I do know they like cracked corn. That's a good one to give them, and just also letting them essentially find food on their own is important, because when they become dependent on humans and they're eating these malnutritious foods, that's not going to do well for them personally and for their offspring down the road. Regarding bird feeding birds, one of the best seeds to offer is black oil sunflower seeds. There's a lot of different bird seeds out there, but that's the one that the most species will go to. Like cardinals love it. Blue jays, they love peanuts like you offer to your squirrels. There's also thistle seed that our American goldfinches love. And there's a wide variety out there.
Somebody had mentioned to me before when I had moved and I started telling these tales of this Disney princess life I was living with all these animals visiting me. They said, you should get a bird feeder. And I had considered it when I looked into it. I never fall. There's a lot of things I get in my head and then something else takes my attention. But it would seem to set up a bird feeder is probably like very low cost and low maintenance, right?
It is pretty low cost and low maintenance. And a lot of it just comes down to making sure it's relatively clean and restocking it as much as you can, just so the birds aren't looking for something that's not there. Who
are the predators of some of these birds other than humans?
Birds themselves are predators to themselves. They're always out trying to outcompete themselves for their best territory or food reserves. Raptors, hawks, owls, eagles. They'll go after birds, specifically hawks and owls. Eagles, they typically go after larger prey like fish, and they'll even scavenge for roadkill sometimes. But we also we have a lot of natural predators with coyotes, raccoons will raid nests for eggs. And there's also kind of an issue with feral cats. There's a lot of cats around here, and they will go after songbirds, and they will kill for sport sometimes too, which is unfortunate because I love cats.
Right.
You don't want to see that happen though.
Right.
So
I see where I live. I see more robins than people sometimes. Are the robins the most common bird people will see around here?
At this time of year, robins they are very common. So yes, they're one of the most common birds you'll see, and you'll see them anywhere. You'll see them in lawns, you'll see them in open woodlands, and they're at this point in spring they've begun to sing and really establish their territories. What's interesting about robins is that unlike the stereotype of a robin, robins are here in the winter. There's just not typically as many because robins are cool. The ones we see in the spring and summer, those are birds that typically fly further south, so in areas in southern Ohio and other areas. The ones we see in winter are birds that bred north of us. And once the seasonal change shifts, the birds that we have in winter move north, and the ones that we have in the summer are coming up from those southern areas. typically.
Going back to all the organized activities that pull people here in the next handful of weeks or so, is all this seems pretty free, right? Or is there any cost involved to be a part of these activities?
It doesn't cost anything really to go outside and enjoy birds how you want to, but if you want to get involved, you can register for Black Swamp Bird Observatory's Biggest Week in American Birding. There's a lot of different field trips you can go on where experts will take you through these exceptional areas to find as many birds as you want.
Are you an expert? You seem like an expert.
Well, I do my best.
Okay.
So, and there's also a lot of great public speakers that are presenting during the festival, too.
It looks like I have my notes somewhere here. You're one of the youngest guides during Birder Week?
I was.
During
Now,
Birding Week?
I started guiding for the Biggest Week when I was about 15 years old.
What was your initial interest in this?
In birds overall,
Yeah.
you mean?
Yeah.
So, like I said earlier with Sidecut, that's the first park I would ever go to because my mom would take me and my brothers, and they would go scootering all over the park, and I'd have my scooter too, but I'd always stop to take a look at a cardinal. I mean, I loved the color red when I was younger, still my favorite color, and so that drew me into the cardinal, and that cardinal brought me into. It really showed me a world of other birds out there. So I had a lot of overdue field guides from the library, just studying up on these birds. What are they? What are they doing? Why are they here? And well, here I am right now on your show.
How smart are they? I mean, can you form a relationship with a bird as you would as I do with some of the squirrels?
You know, it really depends on the species. A lot of the songbirds, they're driven strictly by instinct, and I guess like. It's not legal to own a songbird protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918, but there are cases where people do connect with wild birds. There's American crows and other members of the Corvidae family, so crows and ravens. They have the cognitive abilities of a 4-year-old child. They can speak really well. They can outspeak a parrot. You know how people train parrots to talk? Crows can resemble the voice of a person almost the same.
That's the question I wanted to go back and ask you. Those more predatory birds that you mentioned, the eagles, the ravens, the crows, there's a couple others in there. Would we include owls in that?
Yes, owls are raptors.
Owls and hawks. How frequently do we see those? Those are some birds I've never come along. I know that there was a very old bald eagle that's been at Nature's Nursery with a broken wing. The guy is like 20-something years old, and I think that's near the end of his life where he should have been dead already. Mm-hmm. How frequently will we see those both in like an urban area like this and then maybe farther out in the parks?
Well, what's cool about hawks, unlike the songbirds that migrate at night, hawks actually migrate in the day, and at this time in mid-April, this is a great time to see migrating hawks overhead. So all you really have to do is look up. If you go to urban areas, you'll see Cooper's hawks, which are these really cool, almost steel gray, steel blue, and orange hawks that specialize in going after other birds. If you go out to the open country, you'll find red-tailed hawks. Those are the ones that when you're driving along the highway over to like Cedar Point or something, you'll see like 20 just sitting on the telephone wires. And we have other specialty hawks like red-shouldered hawks who frequent areas like the Oak Openings region. They love those swampy woods out there. And in April, we also have a bird called a broad-winged hawk, which you can see hundreds in a single kettle, as we say, a soaring flock.
We have turkey vultures here, right?
We do.
I think I got familiar with them when I was living in Orlando, Florida, and they were some ugly bastards.
They aren't too pleasing up close, but they are really cool to see, especially when they're in these massive flocks. Turkey vultures are really interesting. If you want to identify one tip that I've learned is when you look at them in the sky, they almost hold their wings like a V. Kind of a shallow V, and when they're soaring, they kind of teeter in the wind, and so that's one way you can distinguish a turkey vulture from a hawk or an eagle.
They're fairly common around here.
They are. Yes,
I would literally I could see one a day in lots of places. When I lived in Orlando, they were almost like neighbors in a way, but they're of no danger to humans, right?
No.
They want nothing to do with us,
no.
Even though they look like ugly, disgusting beasts.
Right? Yeah, they're no danger. No hawks or owls really are much of a danger in this area. As long as you keep your distance from their nests, you should be fine.
What else did I want to ask you? You're obviously, I would say you are very much an expert at 22 years old. Todd told me that you had an article published in Audubon Magazine.
I did.
What's that all about?
I had an article published back in 2017, which was the beginning of my senior year of high school. And that was essentially about just being a young birder and my perspective on it. I grew up playing hockey my whole life, and I still play roller hockey at the Ottawa Park League. And so it wasn't too common for a hockey player to be a bird watcher at that age. So you
didn't fit the stereotype.
I didn't fit the stereotype, but what's cool is that there isn't much of a stereotype anymore. Because like I said, we have great outlets like the Ohio Young Birders Club and other young environmentalists studying in college like I am right now to get ready for the real world, to take their passion into their career.
Yeah, what kind of career do you want to make out of this? What are you studying?
I am studying environmental studies at UT. And I should be graduating on May 7th this year.
Congratulations.
So, thank you.
A couple of weeks away.
Speaking a little earlier, but, you know.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't really know. I think there's a lot of options. I think it's definitely something to do with birds or the environment. I mean, birds will always be my number one focus.
Do you have an ideal, a dream, a perfect job or occupation?
I don't think there's really a perfect job out there. But at the end of the day, I'm really enjoying my position right now. I work with Metro Parks Toledo, and they do a great job with local conservation efforts, and they're really leading the effort here.
Have you ever come across my friend Alex Getz?
I sure have.
Yeah, he's the filmmaker I was talking about.
Yeah, he makes some excellent films.
He does. He has stopped bothering me to come out with him, and I would have. He would just always ask me in the dead of winter when it just stormed, or on the hottest days. I'm like, why can't you ask me in April when it's like 58 and we don't have to get bundled up or sweat?
Well, you know, that's the thing. I mean, nature doesn't care how cold it is or how rainy it is.
I do.
I know. I do too. I mean, I was at Oak Openings yesterday, and I was birding a little bit, but the wind was just ridiculous, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know if I can do this anymore. So I went and got Panda Express.
Good enough. Good call. Last year, people might remember we were watching a very special set of plovers at Maumee Bay. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that and why they were special?
Yeah. So back in May of 2021, we had a pair of piping plovers nesting at Maumee Bay State Park. And what's significant about these plovers is that they are endangered to begin with. However, this was the first time in 83 years that these plovers have nested in the state of Ohio. Their names were actually Nish and Nellie. Nish was banded first in Chicago. Nellie was banded somewhere in Pennsylvania. And these two met here at the shores of Lake Erie and raised 4 chicks on the beaches of Maumee Bay State Park.
I know they left, and then I think they came back, and one of them was injured or eaten?
One of the chicks was eaten, and they believe it was eaten by a mink, which is a small predatory rodent.
Yeah, I think if people had gone out to Maumee Bay, if I have this picture right, the whole area was cordoned off because they couldn't be disturbed, right?
Right.
Yeah. Why did they come here?
Well, piping plovers, they specialize in sandy beaches, and one of the issues with our beaches here in Ohio, it's great for people, but there's always so much activity on these beaches that these plovers, they can't assimilate with all this human activity and other activities like that. So at one point, they just found some privacy, and they continued to go through their courtship displays, and they successfully raised 3 chicks.
Will they ever come back?
A lot of them do. It's called site fidelity. If they were appropriately raised and they managed to get out, they could come back. It's not a promise. I mean, anything could happen in the winter.
Sure.
So, but it would be exciting to see if they do come back, and I hope they do.
I have 2 final questions, but it's been a great conversation. As kind of like a novice bird watcher. Again, my eyes are open now to see all these birds that we've talked about. 2 things. Todd had included in an email something about snorkeling in the rivers here. Was that something you knew about?
Yeah, I am not much of a fish expert by any means, but Todd, he knows a great deal about the ecology that happens subsurface under the water, and there's a lot of different fish. Unlike the birds, you can see them, you can hear them, but the fish, you have to go underwater. But when you do, there is a huge diversity of fish species. These small fish called darters, these little fish that they cling onto rocks underwater or go against the current. There's a huge variety of them here, and he could tell you more about those.
He had mentioned that, and the first thing that came to mind was all the nasty stereotypes that have come along with like the Maumee River, mostly in the downtown area, and the unappealing color of it.
Right.
Could fish fish do live in that, even though we look at it and go, that's a nasty looking color, but
Right.
can life still be there?
Life finds a way.
Yeah.
My favorite movie, Jurassic
Yes.
Park. That's how it goes.
That is a perfect segue. So to my last question, when I was a little boy, my thing was dinosaurs. I
Me too.
loved dinosaurs so much. I could name them all. And a couple of things. If you don't know, and I think we really locked in on this within the last 5 to 7 years, that there are quote unquote dinosaurs everywhere. And we now know that birds are their descendants, right?
Correct.
Can you talk about that a little bit? And if you've been to any exhibits, there are now dinosaurs, and you'll see the feathers being put on these. Well, they're not real dinosaurs, but there are now feathers on these models because of the connection.
Right. I can't say I'm much of a paleontologist or evolutionary biologist. However, I must say I did have the same exact passion as you growing up. Jurassic Park was my go-to movie. Still is. I'm looking forward to the new one coming out in June. But yeah, a lot of these birds descended from some of the dinosaurs that managed to survive the KT extinction period. And
Do you want to talk about that? I know what the KT level is, but the average person probably has no idea.
the KT extinction was essentially the demise of the dinosaurs. The main theory is that an asteroid hit Earth, or a meteor, excuse me, and that wiped out the dinosaurs because it shot, I believe, either carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, blocked out the sun, killed off all the plants, and then when the plants are gone, the food chain is messed up. And so these dinosaurs, they perished of starvation if they did not get hit by the meteor.
Right.
So
Which landed somewhere in Mexico.
somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, yes.
So some other things with that, so since we could talk dinosaurs, it's I had an empty area where I got away from dinosaurs. When I was a kid, I liked it, and then I had the first Jurassic Park trilogy, and then there was the gap. Dinosaurs kind of went dormant, and then now it's back. Whether because I actually feel like we're in an overlooked, not the paleontologists and but for the average person who, like us, like dinosaurs as kids, this is like the golden age of paleontology. I don't know about you, but when I grew up, it seemed like there was the set of dinosaurs that we knew, the Triceratops, the Stegosaur, all the popular ones.
Right.
But now we are finding so many more like we did maybe 100 or 150 years ago. It's every day, every week, once a month, there's always another massive find in paleontology.
It's incredible how these scientific discoveries have evolved themselves. I just read, I didn't read a paper, but I watched a video a couple weeks ago. I don't know if the theory is going to be essentially accepted by the scientific community, but they were doing studies on Tyrannosaurus Rex skeletons. And one of the theories is based on these different qualities in these skeletons. The T-Rex could have been 3 different species. I think the thought was Tyrannosaurus regina, Tyrannosaurus rex, and then Tyrannosaurus emperor. Those were the Latin names that they gave to what could be 3 different species of a T-Rex.
It's also fascinating because none of us were here back then.
Right.
And I think when we grow up, and maybe it's taught differently now. I don't know what dinosaur education is like. It's probably not something until you get into a paleontology or archaeological course at a high-level college, and that's what you want to do. But I think we get stuck, because I know I certainly did, that all these dinosaurs that we loved were on Earth at the same time. And actually, some of the more popular ones were tens of millions of years apart. I think that's one misconception that people overlook. And the other thing is like, oh, well, they just all died by the... You say meteor or asteroid? I'm gonna get it right.
Meteor. To my knowledge, I'm not.
The big
like
rock,
I said, I'm a bird guy, not much of a rock guy.
The bird ties to the dinosaurs, which
Right.
ties to their
It's
extinction.
all connected. One of the 4 laws of ecology. Everything's connected.
It absolutely is. And I think we overlook the fact that they all live tens of millions of years apart. Like,
Right.
And I don't, to just use an example, this might be off. Like the Stegosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus might not have been anywhere near each other.
Not a chance.
Like us and cavemen, completely different times. And humans have been on Earth kind of as us for about like 250,000 years, which is like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of time.
Minuscule.
Considering if you compare that to how long the dinosaurs were here.
Right.
We just think these dumb animals with short arms, and we make fun of them, have neat memes, got blasted by this rock from the sky, and their 10-year existence was gone. They were on this planet for millions of years.
Right. It's crazy. It's crazy. And like you said, they were all divided by their time spans. There's a Triassic period. There was the Jurassic period, which had like the Stegosaurus and Allosaurus and Brachiosaurus, and then Cretaceous period. That's when all the giant theropods really came out, like T-Rex and Spinosaurus.
Were you such a dinosaur nerd? And I say that lovingly.
Oh yeah.
Were you ever
still am?
Were you a dinosaur nerd to the point where when you were watching Jurassic Park? Now, granted, they created all these in a lab and hold on to your butts and all that stuff. Were you such a nerd? Like I do this with my Marvel movies and superhero stuff. I'm like, that's not what that costume looks like. Do you go, those two dinosaurs didn't live on Earth at the same time?
All the time.
Did you?
All the time. Oh my gosh. But at the end of the day, it is a movie, and they accept that. And a lot of it's just to get the public aware, like, hey, this is what we had on our Earth millions of years ago, and now they're back.
Right. And it's and all these movies are born of. I get it. It's the suspension of disbelief, what you have to do for Hollywood and stuff. But more than any other movie, I didn't see the second. I didn't see the middle movie, the one that was out. I saw the first one with Chris Pratt and the Raptors blue and whatnot, and I kind of threw in the towel because I just got kind of fed. I couldn't suspend disbelief of like, why do they keep making these things always go wrong? It's like giving like a 12-year-old keys to a Ferrari.
Right.
Like, this is not a good idea. People always wind up dying or eaten.
Right. Yeah, that makes for good Hollywood. But I mean, I'm going to keep watching those movies.
Sure. What was was Jurassic Kingdom the first one with Chris Pratt?
Jurassic World. It was just Jurassic World.
Okay. Then what was the second one, the most recent one?
Next one is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom.
Okay. And then what's this one going to be?
It's going to be Jurassic World Dominion, and it should be the conclusion of the series.
Should be.
I hope
but
it's not.
It never will be.
Right.
If there's a property that people will go see and they can make money off of, they will keep making them.
Especially with dinosaurs.
Yes. Especially with all the new ones that keep getting discovered.
Right.
In the first 3, did you have a favorite?
First one.
How come?
It's the one that got me interested in dinosaurs, and I was really young. That just hearing that first roar of Rexy, the T-Rex, because that was her name in the trilogy. Just my favorite movie of all time. I mean, it may sound cheesy, but that was my passion growing up, and it's funny because, in a way, my passion for dinosaurs, like the dinosaurs and the birds, kind of evolved into birds as I got older. Like I said, like I was into dinosaurs before birds because I was into dinosaurs probably, when I could start thinking on my own when I was, toddler. And then I started transitioning into the birds when I was about 6 years old. So, but to this day, I'm still a huge dinosaur guy. Huge.
The concept to tie this back to birds so closely, it took me a minute. I understood it. I didn't disbelieve it at all. But when we made that hardline connection from dinosaurs to birds I wish more people were in the awe that I am and you seem to be, because it's Easter. The Jesus stuff, 2,000 years ago. Like, we barely can wrap our heads around that. Most people can't wrap their heads around like a corded telephone or a TV that doesn't have a massive back to it. And Jesus we talk churches and whatnot. We have all these symbols. And these things that are outside because the door is open have a direct lineage to things that we are talking about from hundreds of millions of years ago. And I guess outside of maybe like alligators, some reptiles, there is no other tie to an Earth from millennia ago. And that really it puts me in awe and fascinates me.
It's fascinating. I could be a dinosaur watcher.
Well, you will when you go to the movies. If you find a dinosaur,
I'll let you know.
You have made the greatest discovery in all time. Last question, and maybe this will take us another place. What was your favorite? You said the dinosaur scream, the shriek in Jurassic Park. Did you have another favorite scene or so? Because I like in the second one. First of all, have you ever dressed up for Halloween as Dr. Ian Malcolm?
Oh,
you don't have to do the shirt.
It's a good idea now.
You would look good in the glasses and the black.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I would consider it. I guess growing up, Alan Grant was he was
filled with bad ideas.
Well, I mean, But I mean, poor Alan Grant was just kind of thrown into this stuff. Like
Right.
he didn't want to go.
Who was the older gentleman who passed?
That was oh my gosh.
Yeah, Dr. Grant is back for this one. They had the original cast, right, for this movie?
I forgot his name.
Yes, he was the one with bad ideas for the
Yeah.
engine company.
Right.
My favorite scene was when he was trying, Dr. Malcolm was trying to save his daughter in the RV. Mm-hmm. In the second one.
Yeah.
Loved that scene. And I like the scene, I think, in the first one where they come across a sick triceratops.
Yeah.
And there's a massive pile of dino poop. And
Yeah. Oh yeah.
she's in awe and she just listens to it. And at that point, like, she and the others had realized, like, this is real, and I can help this creature that somebody made in the lab. There's some amazing things there. So
Oh, yeah.
I hope you enjoy the final part of this trilogy.
I sure will.
It was a good conversation. Thanks for visiting.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Had a great time.